Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I know that as entrepreneurs, we just want to go. And I know that we don't often like to talk about burnout, but that's why we have an incredible guest today that I know you're all going to love, because when this guy talks about burnout, he talks about not burning out, but also not pausing, which I feel like a lot of us treat it like, how the heck can you do both of those things? How can you not pause and not burn out? Well, trust me, today's guest is really going to drop some knowledge bombs on us today. So let me introduce you to him. His name is Nate Hebbert. Nate is the founder and CEO of Selfware Consulting, which is an organization that empowers tech companies to beat burnout without pressing pause. We all know entrepreneurs wear a lot of hats, but this man definitely takes it to the next level. Let me share just a few fun facts about Nate's background. He's a software engineer who has worked for 3M, KPMG, and Domo, where he developed custom code for Fortune 500 clients. He also has a background in gymnastics, animation, and teaching. I'm sure there's a lot of great stories there. He's a polyglot in progress, studying Japanese, Chinese, and Spanish, although today we're doing the interview in English, and he's currently working on a book about burnout. This is going to be a fun conversation. We're all going to learn a lot. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Nate Hebbert. All right, Nate, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. And to whoever's listening to this, thank you. I'm confident we're going to make this worth your time.
Yes. Ooh, I love that promise at the top of the episode, Nate. Don't you always, anytime I'm behind a microphone, I wish I could talk to the individual listeners. So I love the fact that you do treat them as such, because we're going to make it valuable. But let's start with you, because a lot of listeners are probably wondering, Nate, how do all those things fit together? So take us beyond the bio. Who's Nate? How did you start doing all these cool things?
I love that you asked this question in your episodes, because this will be the first time on air or on any of my channels that I have gone into a bit more depth into how I've gotten where I am. And I'm going to take us way back to my early childhood. I was homeschooled. We had 30 acres. The neighbors behind us had 50 acres, and we could go on any of it. I explored a lot. And I also liked video games, and I read a lot, and that may become relevant later. Fast forward a few years, when I was 15, I went to a summer camp of sorts called PFEW, which was Pennsylvania Free Enterprise Week. And in this camp, we had financial simulations, we had a marketing campaign, and we competed against other teams. But perhaps most importantly, there were a lot of motivational speakers that came in and talked to us. So this event became not only something that increased my interest in entrepreneurship, but also kind of created a spark in me for motivational speaking and learning more about personal leadership and the things that you might refer to as self-help or life help. And fast forward a few more years, I did not go right into entrepreneurship. And part of that, I think, is because I had this misconception that if I was an entrepreneur, then I couldn't have that and a family. And I think now that that's a limiting belief, there are ways you can make it work. So initially, I went into animation, actually. I went to Brigham Young University for animation because they have one of the best animation programs in the world. And then I ended up switching to computer science with an emphasis in animation. Then I ended up graduating and entering a software company doing computer science, and everything was great. I had a fantastic team, amazing manager, loved the company. But after about a year of working, I started getting really tired, and I had no idea what was going on. Fast forward another year, starts getting really difficult to focus. And in that third year, this was 2023. I was basically, oh man, that year was hell, honestly. And there's just so many things about burnout that people don't understand. Personally, I thought at the time that I was just experiencing some kind of depression, but it wasn't until later that I understood more about what burnout is and everything. So I ended up actually quitting my job because it got so bad that I couldn't even work. I couldn't focus, and I didn't want to get paid to be causing more problems for my team than I was helping. And I hoped that in quitting my job that this would be helpful for what I was experiencing. And it was, until I started trying to do any kind of work again. And I had quit to try and start working on some kind of business. Initially, I was thinking, I want to apply the life help. Maybe I'll do soft skills for software engineers. But as I started to look back at what I had experienced, and as I learned things that helped me to overcome the burnout that I was experiencing, I realized that was what I wanted to share with people. So after learning those principles, things I teach, I was able to work again. It was such an incredible feeling. And now I am dedicating my time to helping other people to avoid the mistakes that I made and beat burnout without pressing pause.
Nate, I so appreciate that overview. There's so many places that I want to dive deep into. And as someone who very much, I experienced burnout in 2013, which was 2 years into me running my own agency. So you called it out entirely. You know how many different things happen in the life of an entrepreneur. And I fully didn't realize what was happening to me. And similar to you, it sent me down that path of recognizing, wow, personal development, what some people call self-help. This is the way to become self-aware, to become aware of everything around us as well. And Nate, I really wondered, coming out the other side of it, how to effectively talk about burnout in a way that if someone hasn't experienced it, how can we caution them away from it? And so I guess my question really is to you to kick off this deep dive today is, can we talk about burnout? Can we know how to avoid burnout if we've never experienced it before? Or is it something that you have to feel it to understand it?
I think we can talk about it because a lot of the things that you experience with burnout are things that you might experience for a short time. But the difference with burnout is that it just continues on and on and on. So a lot of people actually misunderstand burnout, and I just want to give our listeners a better idea, a definition for burnout. So the World Health Organization has actually defined burnout, and they say that burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. It is characterized by 3 dimensions. First is feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job or feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job, and reduced professional efficacy. So people who experience burnout, these are often some of the symptoms that they will see. And we're all tired at some point, but if that is continuing on and on, then that might be burnout. And there's kind of 2 kinds of burnout, if you will. If you think about how people talk about depression, they're like, okay, you can be depressed or you could have clinical depression. And in one case, it's probably not going to last that long, but in another case, maybe that's ongoing. And burnout is something that people will often say, oh, I feel burned out. And that's okay if they want to say that, but they might just be saying, I worked really hard this week and now I'm tired. But the burnout that I really want to help people avoid is something that occurs over months or even over years. And these symptoms, like feeling exhausted or not being able to focus well or having this distance from your job, maybe not enjoying what you used to enjoy, if that is continuing on, then I think that is something that could be a warning sign for burnout.
Yeah, let's go deeper there, because you talk about warning signs, and I think that we only spot the warning signs if we're looking out for them. Like most things in life, is first step is awareness, and then we can actually do something about it. Nate, what does that look like? First of all, what do some of the warning signs look like? And then secondly, what should that trigger in our behavior? What should that trigger in our practice to say, well, hold on, let me halt this right here before it becomes something bigger?
Great question. I think honestly, the best answer is do the things that would prevent burnout before you ever get to the point where you might be feeling those symptoms. Unfortunately, that can be very difficult in our society, the way our jobs work and everything. And a lot of people have just not been taught the skills and the mindsets that help with burnout. This is stuff that is not taught in schools. And I would love to change that someday. But in order to, because this is an issue, I will say some of those warning signs, like you said. For me, the first point was the exhaustion. And again, could be different for everyone, but I remember there were days where I was working from home at the time, and I'd get to the end of the day and I'd kind of just start sliding out of my chair and just end up on the floor, just totally exhausted, almost unable to move, and was way confused. I wondered if something was wrong with me. I got blood work done to see if maybe there was something going on there, but all the blood work came back fine. So I think one of the definite signs is these symptoms mentioned by the World Health Organization, but that coupled with being able to look back and identify, have I been doing a lot of things that take a lot of my energy, or have I been feeling a lot of stress for a long period of time? And if you're seeing that background, if you can put those pieces together, then I think that's a really good indicator that it could be burnout.
Nate, hearing the way you so intentionally and carefully articulate that, it means a lot to me being on the other side of this conversation with you, because I find that all too often in society, we want to just equate burnout to, oh, you're doing too much. And as if it's this simplistic thing. But the fact that you so intentionally talked about, well, no, it's about if you're doing a lot of things that are taking energy from you. So Nate, for example, as an extreme extrovert, I do 8 of these interviews typically every single Tuesday. And a lot of people think, holy cow, you must be exhausted by the end of the day. To the contrary, I love this. This gives me energy. I love interacting with brilliant thinkers and fellow entrepreneurs. And so that actually adds to my energy pool. And I'm grateful for that. However, when I'm in my inbox, if I'm sitting at home all alone trying to work from the podcast studio, then it doesn't work so well for me. And Nate, I'm going to pick on you for a second, because you do a lot as well. You not only are a fellow entrepreneur, but you also are learning multiple languages. You've got so much going on personally and professionally. What's your take on that conundrum that people like to paint of doing a lot of things must equal burnout? I'd love for you to speak more on that.
Absolutely. This is a really interesting point, because a lot of people, like you said, they think, oh, you do too much, then you'll get burned out. You work too much, then you'll get burned out. And what I've found as I've studied this and learned more about burnout is that it's often not the working too much that causes the problem. It's the stress. That's one of the biggest pieces, is just if your work is stressful. But it's also when people become more busy, they start cutting things out of their life. So when I was working, I stopped doing a lot of the creative things in my life. Even though before I had done the animation, I was interested in art, and I loved fantasy as a kid. I read almost exclusively fantasy. And when I got busy, I stopped doing these things. So a lot of people will do this, and when you ask, what are the first things you give up when you're busy? It's things like, well, I don't sleep as much, or I'm not hanging out with my friends, or I'm not working on these personal hobbies. So it's very interesting. You mentioned how your work can be very energizing for you. And if you can find that kind of work and do a lot of that, that is absolutely fantastic. Some people are not in a position where they can do that. So for me, doing a lot of things, it's not just about, oh, what if I'm doing too many things? What if I burn out? It's, if I don't do all of these things that are really bringing me energy in my life, then I might burn out. So it's almost the opposite. I do so many things because I love doing them. I love improving skills and I love learning things. And so that does bring me that energy.
Yeah, and so much. I love the fact that you also called out, I love learning things. For me, play is also a big part of the reason why work gives me so much energy is I allow myself to go on, Nate, what a lot of people would view, if they could watch my work week in progress, they'd be like, you go on a lot of tangents, you go down a lot of rabbit holes. To me, that's part of it. And I would argue, obviously, I know that there's, 7.5 billion different people out there. So there's 7.5 billion different personalities. But with that said, you and I growing up here in the States, we see the traditional 9-to-5 work culture, which, burnout doesn't stay at the office door with you. It's something that a lot of our parents' generation brought home with them, and it went into all different facets of their life. I think that's being reimagined culturally and societally, and I don't think we're all the way there or nearly the way there just yet. But what's your take on that? You brought up hobbies, and obviously you view that as something that's very important. You practice what you preach in that domain. Nate, how do hobbies fit into all of this stuff? And in a culture where we are working so much, how does play? I personally think is that a me thing that I'm definitely trying to impart my view on it? I think it's a universal truth, or is that something you found in your studies of it?
Great question. And as you were talking, I thought of something I want to bring up quick, and that's just how common burnout is. And this will feed into what we're talking about. Burnout, a lot of people think, oh, it's like that CEO or that mom working 3 jobs. But burnout is actually incredibly common. The Society for Human Resource Management did surveys of like almost 1,500 US employees and found that about 44% of people are burned out. And the Gallup organization has done a study. They did it for almost 25,000 people all over the world and found that 76% report feeling burned out sometimes, 28% often or always. And that survey was done in 2019, which was before the pandemic. And I really do feel like burnout is more of a problem now than it was then. So it's almost safe to say that about half of people are experiencing burnout to some degree. And so this is not something for a few listeners. This is for everyone. But now back to your question with hobbies and things like that. For me, it's important to have hobbies or have things you enjoy, but especially it's important to know what is it that will really fill the needs that you have. So when I was experiencing burnout and first learning about energy management, which is kind of the core of what I do, I understood a few things about myself and things that I had enjoyed in the past that gave me a lot of energy and things I had not been doing recently. So what I did is I actually thought to myself, how can I have one activity that will fill up like a lot of needs that I have in my life? I like adventure. I like studying languages, and I like puzzles. I like a challenge. And what I did is I actually got the Japanese version of a video game. And I won't say what the game is, except to say you can have lots of adventures running around as a kid in a green tunic. If you know, you know. And because I did this in Japanese, not only was I feeling that fantasy that I had experienced as a kid, not only was I able to do puzzles, because this game has puzzles, and I was challenging myself, and there was a storyline, and I love story, but I was also improving my Japanese and feeling that progress and seeing it, and that was extremely energizing for me. And one more thing I'll share on this is kind of a key principle of energy management, and that is that we've kind of talked about this already, but any activity that we do is going to require some energy, but it's also going to give you some energy back. And so if you can identify those activities that give you the most energy and don't take a lot of energy, then you're really golden. And for me at that point, I was so burned out. I needed something I could do that didn't require a lot of energy to get started. And pulling that game console from right next to my bed and just starting that right in the morning, that was so little energy. And it was able to get me up and moving and able to do things throughout the rest of the day.
Oh, Nate, hearing you talk about energy management, I'll be honest, so we have a lot of episodes in the show's history, 1,400 of them. We've never had someone come on and talk about energy management. And hearing you talk about this, you already called out the educational system, and I think back to myself of why did we not learn about this in high school, especially in college, especially I think college is the first time in a lot of our lives where we really are at massive risk of burnout because we don't just have academic pressure. We have, I got to find a job pressures. We have social pressures. We have all of those. Nate, you have something so cool. I'm not sure how in depth you want to go in on the air about it, but the 7 core energy controls is so cool. Nate, do you want to introduce listeners to that?
I would love to. And honestly, I could talk about this all day. So just shut me up if I talk too much. So I've noticed that so many people think if I want to get out of burnout, I just need to stop. I need to stop doing things. I need to press pause. And as I got into the energy management and really started building out my curriculum, and I mentioned that I had that interest in soft skills and in personal development for so long, I had been consuming a lot of books and literature and applying things a long time. But this energy management became a connecting link or connecting thread through all of these different things I had learned. And it was like the puzzle just came together. I had the pieces. So there are really so many things that you can do to beat burnout without pressing pause. We mentioned one of them, which is actually adding activities to your life, which seems a little bit contradictory. Another is subtraction, which that one is the closest to what people think. It's identifying the activities in your life that are requiring the most energy, draining the most energy from you, and seeing which ones you can remove. And I want to point out now, too, that it's not just the activities in our lives. Another really interesting thing that I learned is that it's also the people in your lives, and it's also your environment. So, for example, if you live in a house that you really don't like, that is a constant drain on your energy. If you live in a house that you love, you are constantly being energized by that. So there's so many things that we can think about. Does this bring me energy? Is this draining energy from me? And is that a priority to change what I'm doing there? And then there's also optimization. And this is where we look at, after we've removed everything we can, there's still so much that we want to do or that we have to do. And for all of those things, we can try and improve the activity in some way so that it will either require less energy or give back more energy or both. So to keep this interactive, actually, I'll ask you, what are some activities that you have maybe in your work or your day that you think, wow, it'd be nice if I could improve this so that it was more energizing for me?
Nate, for me, I'm going to call myself out because I know a lot of listeners will probably join me here. My email inbox. If I could get a handle on how to make my email inbox give me energy, it would unlock whole new levels for me.
Yeah, no, that's great. So let's look at a few different things that you could do for this. One, and maybe this is more controversial, some people may like to employ some form of AI to help with the management of the inbox. But another thing I like is there's a really famous YouTuber and author. His name is Ali Abdaal, and he was actually one of the people who helped inspire some of what I do. There were a lot of inspirations. He has a book called Feel Good Productivity, and one of the things he says in this book is, for any activity, ask yourself, what would this look like if it were fun? And for checking your inbox, maybe it's you choose the best music that's going to energize you more, or maybe you can gamify your inbox somehow, right? Is there a way that you can process the emails, and then when you check something off, or maybe you're earning rewards for yourself later, so you're anticipating that. Another thing that you can do is actually just to acknowledge every little win. This is an interesting one because our brains, they work with a lot of neurotransmitters, and this gets more into the science behind how we feel energy. It's not just about having enough calories in our body from food, but it's also about dopamine that helps us to feel more motivated, and it's about oxytocin that helps us to feel more calm, which helps counter that stress. And if we can kind of manipulate those neurochemicals, then we can get ahead. So if you, for every email you check off, can do something that sends a signal to your brain that you accomplished something, then that could give you a little boost of dopamine, which could help motivate you to continue further, and you may feel that sense of progress, right? Another thing you could do is, if there are people that you really enjoy being around, if you check your inbox while you're with them in the same room, that might seem like it's not a big deal, but some people call it body doubling. I don't know all the reasons why it can be helpful, but it definitely is for some people. And some of that may be because social activities, you get more oxytocin, so you might feel more calm. But those are ways that you can increase what you're getting out of that activity. And something like delegation would be a way that you can decrease the amount of energy that it takes, because then all you have to do is follow up on someone else.
Yeah, so well said, Nate. Nate, I feel like you just explained why the one time a week that I am great at responding to emails is when there's a local boba shop near me here in Tampa that I say to myself, it's open late, and so I just tell myself, all right, tonight I'm going to bring my laptop to the boba place, I'm going to get my favorite boba drink, I'm just going to sit there and get through emails as quickly or as slowly as I happen to, and that's something that really makes it a more pleasant experience. If only it was okay to just slam boba all day, every day. So, Nate, I feel it's so much fun. I really appreciate how much intention and thought you put into all of this work that you do, because it's incredibly important work. And I already know that we are definitely going to have you back on the show at some point, because I feel like we're only scratching the tip of the iceberg here today. But
yeah.
Podcasting is unfortunately we don't go the Seth, or I'm trying to think of who has those. Tim Ferriss has like 7-hour episodes, which, as much as I would love to do, we know that our listeners are busy fellow entrepreneurs. So, Nate, with that in mind and how many nuggets of knowledge you've already dropped on us today, my final question always is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners, knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and also knowing that you're one of us, which I feel like is part of your superpower in understanding your work even more deeply as a fellow entrepreneur? What's that one thing you want to leave them with today?
I think the one thing that I would leave with people is you need to redefine the word important in your life. And that can be really challenging because society often tells us what is important. So a lot of people have probably heard of the 4 squares they mentioned in the 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. I think it's called the Eisenhower Matrix. And they list like what is urgent and not urgent, and important and not important. And I remember looking once at some example activities they put in the not important box. And It was things like doing a crossword puzzle or using social media. And for a lot of people, that is not important. But if that is something that truly, really energizes you, you need to understand that that actually is important. They also mentioned in the 7 Habits that idea of sharpening the saw. And people who sharpen the saw in order to cut down a tree, their goal is not to have the sharpest saw. Their goal is to cut down the tree. And the people that we care about in our lives, that's the tree. And our jobs that we really want to succeed in, that's the tree. The activities that we do, like going to the gym or playing a video game or reading a book, that's sharpening the saw, but it doesn't mean we think those things are more important than the tree. It just means that we are prioritizing the tree by doing those other activities. So redefining what is important in your life and understanding what will best contribute to your success in the long run, that is what I would leave with listeners.
Oof, Nate, giving me a goosebumps moment while we're on the air together. That resonates so deeply with me, and I know it's going to do so in all different ways for each and every individual listener. So, gosh, Nate, I am so in admiration of the work that you do. You're doing such important stuff out there with so many cool businesses and leaders and people, and I'm grateful to have you in our incredible entrepreneur to entrepreneur circle. So, for listeners who want more Nate goodness in their lives, I know that you've got an email newsletter. You've got so many good things that you're putting into the world. So drop some links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
You can definitely find me on YouTube. The channel is Selfware Consulting. So that's SELF. Sounds like software, but it's actually selfware. And that pun is intended since I used to be a software engineer. And I also do have a newsletter. You can go to my website, which is also selfwareconsulting.com. And from there, if you join the newsletter, you would get all updates through all of my channels and etc. So that's probably the best place to go.
Yes, and listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Otherwise, Nate, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Brian. Love the impact you're making with the show and really appreciate your team reaching out to me. It's been a pleasure.